Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our new guest mentors, Jack Zhou, who comes to us from a background in robotics and engineering, a little bit of technical and some business too. So he's got an interesting story. And Jack, if you could do a better job at explaining yourself and what you're doing now, and then maybe we'll get back into the history and about Jack when he was growing up. So Jack, what are you up to these days?
Sounds good. And nice to see you, Luki. A little bit about myself. I've been running actually a robotics and education company. So behind me are some of the cool creations that students been creating. Not all of them are my students, but some of them are other teachers that are here. So been focusing on a lot of entrepreneurship, and our goal is really to inspire future engineers. So from robotics to coding to game development, we've just been having a lot of fun. As a tinkerer myself, I just love what I'm doing, and I've just been doing that for the past 3 years. Yeah.
That's perfect. So if we step back in time a little bit, Jack, and talk about what was Jack like as a kid? What were you like growing up? Maybe some of the earliest, fondest memories that you've had, and then how do you go from there into what you're doing now? And we'll probably walk through the journey of that process. But what were you like as a kid, Jack?
I think as a kid, I will always be the person trying to think of some games to create. As an only child, you got to really figure out things to keep yourself entertained. So, exploring the neighborhood and just trying to imagine some adventure and create games and then find friends in the neighborhood and just really keep myself entertained, I think, really. And along the way, I realized that, hey, I really like doing this. And then other kids would join in the neighborhood and have fun together. So I think that's where it all started. Just from boredom to trying to entertain myself.
Cool. So as an only child, you were on your own. So obviously you had to come up with ways to get more excited, and you created games on your own. What about some of the interesting in things like engineering or marketing and stuff like that? Where do you think might have planted the seeds for those interests when you were younger?
I think it was interesting where I had my mom actually came from more of a marketing and sales and business development, where my dad was more of an engineer and focusing, he was more of industrial and building and development. So I had a mix of both sides, and I was like, which one do I do? I'm just wondering. And I think that kind of sparked my interest. I was interested in both because I was like, well, one side, you get to present some cool ideas and talk about a story and really inspire people as well. And on the other side, you get to build something and show it to people as well. And at the end of the day, when you merge it all together, I think that's more wholesome. So slowly, that's kind of where it started. Yeah, and some of the cool things that I remember dabbled into. I was actually working and selling cookies as a kid, and I just thought that was really fun. I would actually mainly sell to parents, friends, really, and just be like, hey, you hungry for a cookie, or guilt trip them? And they'll be like, okay, we'll buy it. And I just got really excited. And I was like, I'm selling a really good product. And when I see that they're eating something delicious, I feel really good. But then that got me just thinking, what if I created my own stuff? And then I realized that I had to learn a lot. So I had to figure out, what do I want to create? Do I still want to make cookies, or do I want to do something else? So some of the adventures that I've done actually in school, I realized that I'm trying to find a need, trying to figure out what people really wanted. So I actually created a film club at school. I realized that there were quite a bit of people who love to watch videos, and at that time, YouTube wasn't really as popular. So I got a group of friends, and we just created videos to entertain. And then the principal actually asked us to, hey, do you guys want to film the basketball team? And do you guys want to film that? So we kind of transitioned to like a mini media for the school. So that just got me thinking of building more and more things. And that's kind of how it started.
Sounds good. So when you're growing up, you start this kind of like film business, kind of
Yeah.
entertainment studio, so to speak, and then well, you have to make a decision at some point to go into university, college, or to do something else for kind of the next segment of your life. How do you make that decision? So was it on the film side, the creation, the media side? Was it more on the marketing? Was it on the engineering? How did that decision take place?
Yeah. So when I applied to university, I had a few things that I was thinking about. Do I want to continue with filming? Or do I want to, like, what else? What are other things that I like to explore? So ultimately, I started actually applying for both actual filming and actually business. So I thought at the end of the day, running any product, running anything is related to business and commerce. And those are some of the key things that I need to understand first. And I just thought, well, from there, I also wanted to figure out, oh, marketing sounds really exciting. You got to use your left side and the right side of the brain. And
Right.
you know what? I've been doing that all throughout childhood. So I thought that's something that will be a good start. So when I actually applied to school, I was applying to Western, York, Waterloo, and all over, like really Ontario. But ultimately, I actually decided to go to U of T because it was the closest one to Toronto, and it was just easier, close to home. And if I needed to go home, it's not a super long trip. So
Right.
that kind of helped me with my decision making process. And the decision between film and business, to me, that was an easy one, at least at the time, was because I felt that film was something I enjoyed, I was doing, that was fun. But at the end of it, I thought business was a foundation of keeping the engine going and keeping everything, moving forward. So creating a film is great, but someone needs to figure out how to make it sustainable and create a correct business model out of it. So that's why I went into business.
Cool. So you decide to go to U of T for business and do some things in marketing, and then I know you also did a stint in computer science. So how does that transition happen?
Yeah. So the other transition that happened was, I did my first internships. One was at RBC, and another one was actually at LinkedIn. And when I started talking to some of the engineers at LinkedIn, I was like, "Oh, this is really cool!" And they're actually more able to build stuff. And
Right.
now the other part of my brain started thinking, "Okay, I want to build stuff too." So I started coding by myself, and I knew that I was at the time I was in my second year, and I already had some computer science as well, and I was like, you know what? I want to also complete that side of the degree as well, and I want to work on my computer science courses. So I started adding that part into my I guess spectrum of classes. It definitely made me a lot more busier, but I thought at the end of the day, I also want to be able to build stuff too and code stuff, and the logic and just creating things were really, really something that excited me.
Sounds good. So you're in school now, and you're doing a hybrid of kind of business and computers and technical, and then you're approaching graduation, where you kind of have to say, okay, what do I want to do when I graduate? What sort of jobs should I apply for? Like, how does that process go along in your head, right? So do you go more business? Do you go more tech, or do you do the hybrid, or what was the thought process when you were graduating?
Yeah, and that was actually a really big challenge because you're taking a lot of these courses, and when you're in school, things are somewhat of black and white. You're like, oh, I want to get that skill, I take that course. But then all of a sudden, when you go to the job world, you're like, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make. And every decision, you kind of, go a path forward, and that would impact of where your next 5-10 years go. So
Sure.
that was a big struggle. Do I want to say do more on the business side and do more on the technical side? And I remember talking to you a lot about this, and I was like, I don't know what to do. There's so many decisions, which are all good decisions, but yeah, I think I had such a huge dilemma. So I started, I would say I started doing a bit of both, and then luckily, my first job actually was more consulting. So consulting for a business that would, I would scope out the requirements and build and develop the features. So was a little bit of both as well. And that really helped me because I get to talk to clients and they get to tell me how their day went, but they also get to tell me their pain points of what we can do to solve their businesses. So CRMs and ERPs are like building a business solutions for these businesses. That was really exciting too. So I get to learn a lot there.
Sounds good. So now you've graduated. You've got kind of the best of both worlds, where you're in consulting and you're dealing with the business side, but also able to kind of build and understand kind of requirements for other businesses. And then you venture into the world of entrepreneurship. So how does kind of that build up or come to fruition? And what were some of the decision points that you had along the way?
Well, to be honest, you're one of the key inspirations, as I see that you do a lot of entrepreneurship as well. And I think naturally, as doing consulting side and working working with different clients, you see, oh, okay, you start thinking how to build stuff. You start learning about different business models, operation and process, and you realize that you're really excited still going back to the roots of building things, and you want to make an impact. So that's the key thing that I really, really wanted to do. So I started figuring out what were some of the things that I'm passionate about. Is it education? Is it sciences? And is it any other things? So those are, each of these industries are some of the ones that I'm thinking about. And I stumbled upon education, where I had the opportunity to teach a small group of 10 students, and they were just really excited about coding. So I started teaching them, and that's kind of how I realized that, oh, this is really fun. Maybe perhaps this could become more of an entrepreneurial adventure. But at the time I was still working. So right. I didn't have the courage to say, hey, let's quit the job 100% and let's just, try this out. So, yeah.
And I guess, how did you make that decision? So right now you're working full time. You have a pretty sustainable, pretty comfortable life in that realm, and then you have this thing where, whoa, this is interesting, this is fun, and people or kids are learning and they're growing. How do you make the decision? What were some of the key points or considerations that you made when you went, you know what, I'm going to start doing this all on my own and do it 100% instead of just a thing on the side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. I first started, I said I had to have a few criteria. One, is the business growing enough, or is this kind of just a luck? We had a few students that, friends that recommended. And two, if I were to do this full time, what are the key pillars that needs to be there in order to make it scalable and sustainable? Mm-hmm. So those were the first two. And the other thing is, do I see myself doing this for a really long time? Or is this something that I'm interested in? It's kind of like, you build something and then you're like, okay, I'm done building that and I'm going to head back. Yeah. So those three questions were answered in the following ways. Well, first one was, in order to make it sustainable, we had to figure out solutions that, when students learn, we had to also make sure that me and other teachers could use the curriculum and the content to teach, and it's scalable that way. And the other thing is, even though if we make it scalable, we have to also to make sure that is it sustainable where students are enjoying this. So we realized that students got really excited about what we've been doing, and the parents are referring other parents, and that's kind of how it grew. It grew out of my basement, really. So we were just working with a bunch of students and teaching them, and then they started recommending more students because they're like, yeah, we really want to do this. We haven't seen this in school. And then the recommendations got a little bit more, and then some teachers got involved, and then some schools got involved, and then we started running some competitions as well. And that scaled from 10 students to 100 students to 60 schools now, to just working with them. So that grew, and throughout that process, when I knew that parents and students were recommending some of the services that we done, I thought, okay, it's time for me to really dedicate this full time, because I don't want to stop. I don't want to, disappoint the students, because it's, there are a lot of young students that really look up to a lot of the things that, well, a lot of the engineers do, and we really don't want to disappoint them. So, partially out of guilt, but partially out of excitement that we want to make sure that these kids have a bright future. So, we dedicated that, and that's kind of how I transitioned. So it was those three tiers. That's kind of how I made my decision.
Amazing. So sounds like a pretty smooth and typical entrepreneurial journey. But as most folks know, there's a lot of ups and downs, bumps and bruises along the way. So if you're willing to share some of the kind of like the doubts, the hesitations, the challenges along the way, anytime where you said, "Oh, I'm not cut out to do this." I know for myself, I had a lot of imposter syndrome where who am I to be building a business and helping others, that sort of thing. Did you have any of those same experiences as an entrepreneur?
Oh man, too many. So way too many. But I could definitely talk about the big ones, the ones that are like, oh man, this is like a huge bottleneck to the operation. So I talked about how we had 60 schools that were working with us and running certain STEM related activities. And in order to have that scale, we turned from 10 students all the way up to like 800 students in the public schools. And I needed to make sure that it was scalable enough. So we built a website to make sure that we had all the engineering content and everything was step by step, and also a lot of features on there. What ended up happening was, well, when all of a sudden you have 800 students that join at the same time, the server crashes and everything just like, it was a lot to handle. And at the time is, on one side, I was working on the website. On the other side, I was teaching. And on the other side, we were working with new students and marketing. And then we needed to make sure that the schools were able to use the platform, and we had to train the teachers. Right. So that was very chaotic at the time. And how did we pull through? That's the question.
Right. That's going to be my next question.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think at that time, I didn't have time to hesitate to be like, oh my God, I don't know. I only had time afterwards to be like, oh, okay, take a breather and be like, we passed this hurdle. So I had to ask a lot of my friends. Luckily, when I was in computer science, I had a lot of friends that are crazy developers. Mm-hmm. Making good friends who are passionate about studying and learning. They helped me make sure that the servers and then the website was well in place. Because what I built was a prototype, and what they built, they were able to make it more scalable.
Sure.
So they just patched up a lot of things and make sure that we had a lot of securities and everything was working. On the other side, you know what? I had a lot of help from my parents and a lot of just friends just supporting. And that's the part where you really know that a true friend is there when you are like really, really down. And one thing I realized is that I just had to ask for help from the technical side and just from operations and just get all this organized. These were good problems to have, but they were problems that be solved. So I had one friend that helped me, Michelle, and she was able to actually work on the platform and just really solve those issues. And Sunny. And at the time, so both of them were able to help quite a bit with the platform. And on the other side, I went into working with a few other teachers, and we had some of our early hires, and we trained them, and they were able to pick it up no problem. And some of my actually senior students, the ones that actually went to university for engineering, they came back. Actually, they said, okay, we want to be teachers and we want to help out. Amazing. And at that time, it was just the start of the business. So actually, I hired my first student who became my teacher, and they just crushed it. So yeah, the pieces came together, but it just took a lot of asking and just letting people know that, hey, we were in a very vulnerable state.
Yeah, I think what I took from that is even though entrepreneurship seems like a solo sport where you're doing it all on your own, it really is the relationship and the friends that you have, the people around you that can help make it even more successful and also pull you out through the rough patches as well.
Yeah. And then I think there's just way too many rough patches and close calls. But Like that was a really big one. And I think at the end of the day, it's just making sure that there's a support channel. Because yes, I definitely do agree. Entrepreneurship is a very solo journey because you've got to think what are the next steps, how to lead a team, and all of those things. Um, Most of the time, you're asking others, "Hey, how are you feeling? How's your work?" And rarely do people ask you, "Hey, how are you feeling? How's your work?"
Right.
Which is not the complaining side, but those are the things that you really. It is partially solo, but there are groups of people that are willing to make sure that like you can't stand alone. It's it's a huge network to start something like this.
Yeah, and I would recommend anybody who is going down the entrepreneurial path is to find other entrepreneurs to hang around with, because oftentimes when you're going through life, most of your friends, classmates, and those that are around you are more on the employee path, right? They're looking to get a job and stuff, and they don't understand the same challenges that you do, right? Entrepreneurship often is a 24/7 365 type of thing where hopefully you get some sleep in there, but it's a little bit different where it's almost always on your mind, like, well, when you're not working and taking some time off, well, should you be working, because this could be another client or another student or another someone that you can support. So definitely building that support structure would help. I wanted to chat a little bit more about kind of what you built so far and your students. So we had a discussion on camera on things like student leadership. So this is helping them build some leadership skills and also things like social skills and soft skills, which I like to call human skills, after what kind of Simon Sinek says, because it's no longer soft and optional. It's human and necessary, that everyone needs to have these types of skills. So like effective communication, time management, relationship building, and all that sort of stuff. Even learning to learn is a meta skill that I think everyone should have. But talk to me a little bit about kind of your experiences with your students and even yourself in gaining, acquiring, and being around those things.
Yeah, so a lot of us in this environment, because we're teaching students to code and we're teaching them robotics, and there's a lot of engineering involved, from mechanical, electrical to computer engineers. And what I find that definitely students need to have is the human skills. And this is, and I've seen it a lot where students are great with solving a certain problems, but when it comes to explaining that problem, how they solved it, or what exactly was the problems, those are some of the key things that we need to make sure. Because I think having those, like you said, having those human skills are just super important, because most of the time you're not a solo engineer building one product and that's it. You're working with other people. You got to collaborate with everyone. And one person builds one piece of the puzzle, the other person will build another piece. And you have to put it all together. And if you guys are building two separate pieces that never connects, there's arguments, there's different things. And those are the things that students need to learn at an early stage. And I witnessed that a lot when we were running. We had a group of students this year doing the competition, and they had to build a robot. There was a design team, there was the mechanical team, and there was a computer team, or programmers. And every one of them have different personalities, and they had to put it all together to build a robot that would be able to autonomously pick up something, throw something, and do stuff. They had to do a lot of communication back and forth. There's a lot of clashing of conflicts, and everyone had some great ideas for sure. But at the end of the day, they had to come together, and students need to all become leaders and really, see and work together. And that was just super important in making that chemistry flow together. The other part was when they had to present their robot, of how their code and their technical solutions work. The programmers coded for a very long time, spending a lot of day and nights coding, and they had great solutions and a lot of mathematical problems that were solved. But when it comes down to explaining it to judge whether they're technical or non-technical, it has to be explained in a beautiful manner so that people can understand and they get excited about what is it that you're building. And I think that's important, whether you are a product manager or an engineer. And it just goes, that skill, I think it's just a lifelong skill.
Yeah, and I think we definitely align on that. Where, well, I teach that kind of full time in terms of all these
Hmm.
human skills, and you from a more practical standpoint, like it happens where like if you have a team and you have to build something, inevitably there's going to be a clash or a conflict or a difference of opinion, and it's communicating those as well as other things that allow you to be a little bit more successful. So yeah, I'm sure we could do it like a deeper dive in any one of these topics, but I'd love as we start to close things up is what would you say as some of the swipe, the stuff I wish I knew earlier for yourself, that maybe a couple of the key milestones in your journey, right? So what are some of the things that you'd want to give young Jack a little bit of a pep talk along the way? What are a couple of those swipes that you'd want to share?
Oh yeah. I think one of the key thing is definitely keep like a lot of the time is actually that feeling when you're jumping into a pool when you're on a diving board,
Okay.
and that's the feeling when you're about to introduce a new product or a new service or just try something new, right? And if you think about those divers who are diving for a long time and who are diving off those diving boards, um, I'm sure they have that like blink of a second that they're a little bit afraid, like, oh man, this is pretty high up here. But when they do it a billion times, they're, that second maybe turned into a microsecond or something really, really small, and they're able to dive into it, no problem. So when I was young, a lot of the time was when I'm trying something new, right? It's hard for me to really start that. And I'm saying that even as an entrepreneur, like we had like a lot of people say, oh, entrepreneur, you must be great at starting things or you must be great at diving into things. I would beg to differ. We always have that kind of looking at down at that height and be like, whoa, this is pretty high up. Even if people have a lot of experience, even if they're Olympic divers. So I would just tell myself, you know what, dive right into it and try it. Because when you launch a product, when you launch something, you will only learn. And when you learn, can you improve and iterate? And that's the same thing that it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur. It could be the same thing when you're doing business or you're working at any industry. Because when you first start, it's going to be that height of the diving that you feel like, whoa, I'm above waters, and hopefully I don't hit the side of the swimming pool or a rock. But you know what? At the end of the day, the whole thing's water. You just gotta dive and try it. So yeah, that's what I wish I knew earlier, and I'm still practicing that, and it is not easy, but trying to get better at that.
What I took away from that was to, well, start when the diving board is low, when you can sell cookies to your friend, your parents' friends, right? And that's starting something new, right? And that is kind of like the 1 foot diving board instead of the 40-foot diving board, that sort of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
So that when you get up to that 40 feet, when you're graduated or starting your own business or introducing new products across 60 schools or whatever, then you feel a little bit more comfortable because you didn't go from 0 to 40. You went from
Yes.
0 to 1, and then 1 to 2, and then 2 to 5, and then so on and so forth until you're able to build yourself up. So I think that's a lot of great words of wisdom. And yeah, folks are able to take those chances, especially when you're younger, when it's, well, I don't want to say it doesn't mean as much, but it probably means a lot to you at the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it probably is better for your long-term growth. And at the end of the day, whatever happens, treat it as learning and growth, right? So one of the quotes that I love is, I never lose, I either win or I learn, right? So essentially take whatever could be a failure, and it's only a failure if you don't learn anything from it, right? So take that as learning, and then you never really have to encounter failure. So thanks so much, Jack, for joining us on this episode. Are there any kind of parting words that you want to leave for our audience?
Well, sure, yeah. You know what? I think at the end of the day, like I learned a lot from you, Luki, and you know what? The key things that I've learned a lot was what doesn't matter if you're purely technical. Definitely work on those human skills, and those leadership comes such a long way. Because at the end of the day, you hear a lot of students that like that here. It's like, oh, I know Java, I know C, but Java, C, and those kind of technical skills are going to be replaced by other more crazier technical. But the
Right.
human skills of working with people are just so important. So thank you so much for all these years that you've been actually teaching me. I just appreciate it all. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Jack, and thanks so much for kind of taking some of those words of wisdom and applying them. So, where can folks go to find out more about you, about With Robotics, and some of the future things that are up and coming for the new engineering and robotics endeavors that you're up to?
Sure. Yeah. So for Wiz Robotics, people can definitely go on to www.wizrobotics.com and they'll be able to see some of the cool stuff that we're building. And as for the competitions that we host, and for a lot of the cool STEM related activities, they could go to Wiz Prodigy, Prodigy as PRODIGY.com, and they could check out some of the cool things that we're building there as well. And if anyone wants to add me on LinkedIn, I'm always excited to talk to them about entrepreneurship or innovation and anything related to that, about technology. So I love to talk about those topics and about students in education and inspire our future engineers. So definitely add me on LinkedIn. It's Jack, Jack, and Zhou, Zhou.
Sounds good. So thanks, Jack, for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Take care. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.